Things just got a lot more interesting for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We have multiple new surprising updates ahead of tonight's big game, but one big question mark surrounding the goaltending has emerged, and Craig Berube has shed some light on the Leafs' master plan surrounding the situation. I'm going to break down exactly what that is and discuss what it means going forward. And we will also be live following tonight's game, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But before we get into all this, folks, quick reminder, if you're part of the 70% who aren't subscribed to the channel, it's the place to be for daily Leafs content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable, so thank you guys for that. Darius, a lot to go over today. Obviously, the Leafs are playing a big game tonight. They need to win. They are 3 points ahead. They have a 3-point cushion on the Lightning and a 4-point cushion on the Panthers heading into tonight's game. They need to win this game. And one of the big surprising updates, and I actually called it in yesterday's video, going to give myself a little bit of props there, but Anthony Stolarz, and you can see this here, Anthony Stolarz is in the Leafs net for the morning skate and is expected to make his second straight start tonight at home versus the Blue Jackets. And this tells a bit more of a story, and Craig Berube came out and revealed some information, but I want to hear your thoughts on this first. Of course, Jake McCabe is out, David Kampf is out. Hopefully, we'll get some sort of information and updates surrounding them over the next day, maybe before or after tonight's game. But Stolarz, they want to give him a second start in a row, and as we approach the playoffs, this is the same kind of energy you're going to get in the playoffs, or you can't be having multiple days off. So I think this tells us a lot.
Yeah, I think this is telling us exactly what their plan is at this point. When I saw this morning, I was like, this is interesting because if there was ever a game to give to Joseph Woll, right, like it would be this one. The fact that they've been alternating back and forth, kind of like what the Boston Bruins, their system and what they were doing the last couple of years. Heading into this game, the fact that Stolarz did play on Wednesday, I'm like, this is Joseph Woll's game. You're playing Columbus, this is the game that he would get into, but he's not. And Anthony Stolarz is getting back-to-back games. And yes, he had a good one against Florida, absolutely. And maybe you want to ride the hot hand. I do think there is something to that, but I think this is actually more of a test. This is a final exam, I think, for Anthony Stolarz, where, how do you handle back-to-back games, right? And then I think that Joseph Woll, and if you look at the schedule coming up after tonight, they have 6 games left. 2 of them are against both, Florida teams, and then obviously you're playing the Montreal Canadiens. So there's some hungry teams in there. There's going to be some, very competitive games. Obviously, most of them to end the season because of the standings will be, but, I think Joseph Woll somewhere in there is going to get back-to-back games as well, just to see. I think this is the final test. Again, they've been alternating back and forth. So for them to do this today, I think that they're quizzing both goalies just to see how they handle back-to-back situations.
Yeah, I think Stolarz is going to be the goalie that ultimately gets the nod on playoff opening day, which is actually just the playoff opener. It's a weird way for me to put it, but regardless, it is going to get interesting. He actually spoke out on the kind of goaltending tandem. He said, I like his game a lot, and I just think I can get him into consecutive games. He explained following Saturday's on-ice session. Then we have a back-to-back series against the Florida teams, of course, Tampa and the Florida Panthers. Really, that's all the thinking that went into it. I'm just trying to find a little consistency here moving forward. I'll have to split them over the next 2 games, and then we'll go from there. So I feel like it's like the most well-known secret is that Stolarz is going to be the opening, the goalie on the first game of the playoffs. I think at this point now, it's interesting to me. The big question mark is going to be who's playing in that, like you mentioned, the back-to-back series against the Florida teams. They probably have an easy decision. One goes against Florida, one goes against Tampa Bay, which won't probably tell us too much. But I think just the sentiment here is that they're really trying to find some consistency because come playoff time, they're going to be playing a lot of games. And the first playoff game is tentatively scheduled for the 19th of April, which gives them not very many days of rest. I don't know, 2 or 3 games of rest, something like that. Not much rest at all in between the end of the season and the playoffs, which means that they're going to have to consistently play. And of course, when a series starts, they play every couple games. They're going to have to consistently, every couple days, sorry, they're going to have to consistently play these guys. And that's one negative of having such a good goaltending tandem. They haven't had that consistency all year.
No, they haven't really, string a lot of games together. Besides when Anthony Stolarz was out, right? Joseph Woll got into a lot of games, but he wasn't playing the best hockey of his season at that point. I think he is now at this point. But again, I think that they're going to test both goalies with the remaining 6 games here. I think they already have in mind that it's Anthony Stolarz. I mean, anybody at this point can see it, right? That it's probably going to be him unless something happens, whether it's an injury or maybe he just has a couple bad games leading into the playoffs, and then you have to ride the other goaltender. So we'll see. But like you said, I mean, there's no breaks in the playoffs. You're going to be playing every other day. They're not going to alternate goalies. I think that's a bad idea because your mindset, your game plan can change depending on who's in net, right? I do believe that, the way that Stolarz plays with that calmness, with the poise, it flows through the rest of your team, right? And I think Joseph Woll does play with that at, some points too, but I feel like they play like a different team in front of Anthony Stolarz. So I think it's going to be him as we inch towards the playoffs here. And again, it's pretty interesting that he's getting back-to-back starts. And another big game tonight, like, the one against Florida, big game. I know Florida was missing a lot of guys, but you have to come in, you have to win, right? They did that. And then tonight, Columbus, if they don't win this game against the Leafs, they're in tough. Like, they're in a playoff push here. They're trying to get that last wild card spot. So they're going to play a hard game here tonight. So it's going to be another fun one to watch.
Yeah, and I think in theory, the Blue Jackets they're gonna be one of the weaker teams to at least play over the last couple weeks of the season here. But they need to go out and win this game. And there's a few other things that are interesting. Let's dive into the lineups a little bit. And of course, again, Berube said they just want to get him into his consecutive games. We'll probably see Joseph Wall also get into consecutive games at some point. We'll touch back on that in a minute. But I want to go over the lines tonight. These are the lines we're going to see. Of course, they didn't skate this afternoon. They play in a few hours here. Nyes, Matthews, Marner, McMahon, Tavares, Nylander, Lawton, Domi, Yarncroke. I mean, that top nine has been similar now for the past few games. Obviously, come playoff time, maybe replace Yarncroke with whoever else. Pacioretty probably. But on the fourth line there, and I'm also curious to see what your thoughts are on this. Now that we know McCabe is out, now that we know Stolarz is in, do you think that Nick Robertson, this is probably his last chance. I'm venturing to say this is probably one of his last chances. If he has a really good game tonight, he has a really good end to his season, maybe they factor him in there. But I'm more interested to see how Benoit Myers pairing, because no one's really talking about it. It has been hit or miss at times. It's obviously very physical. There's no puck movement there, even though Benoit's been a bit more of an offensive threat lately. That's the biggest worry for me. Obviously, we're not too worried about Jake McCabe in theory, but if he misses any amount of time, you're going to have to, for some reason, McCabe is not available for the playoffs. Obviously, don't want to put that into the universe, knock on wood. But if he isn't, Myers, Benoit, is that a good enough pairing for the blue line come playoff time? That's the big question.
It's not, because both of them can't move the puck. I mean, Simone Benoit is one of the worst puck movers I've ever seen play at the NHL level, to be frank. But they're not going to be able to move the puck. So I don't even know if that pairing stays like that. I think it's that way because OEL and Tanev. We'll see what happens. All I know is that it's a really big physical pairing. That's for sure, right? So maybe they'll bring that to the table, and maybe you don't need to hold on to the puck for too long. Just get it up to the forwards. And then in terms of the forwards, I think that Robertson, I think their minds are already made up on Robertson. He's in here because David Kampf is injured. I don't think he's going to be playing in the playoffs unless there's injuries or something happens. I think Pacioretty is going to be in the playoffs. Pacioretty at this point, for him to not be in the game one lineup makes no sense if he's healthy, right? He's going to be there because of what he's brought to the table and what we know that he can bring to this lineup this season. So he's going to be there. And who's the casualty of that? It's going to be Robertson, because I think that Yarncroke also has more experience and brings a certain skill set to the table too. And I think Berube really values stuff like that, right? And pairings. And we've talked about that throughout the forward group, right? So I think they're starting to find something with that third line too. Like, I am curious as to why Robertson's in on the fourth line, right? Like, I wonder if they like what they see with the third line right now and they don't want to mess that up. We know that the top two lines are not changing. Unless there's injuries, this is what it's going to be heading into the playoffs, and I'm fine with it because they've been playing great, especially the second line as of late, but or maybe just John Tavares at that rate. But I think that Robertson's only in the lineup because of injuries right now. And that's coming from me, who's been defending Robertson all season, right? So I love Nick Robertson, but the way this team has been built, the makeup of this team, if everyone's healthy, we don't know what's going to happen with David Kampf either, right? But if everyone's healthy, he won't be in the lineup in the playoffs. But I am interested to see what he's going to do in a fourth line role tonight.
Yeah, free agent after this year, Nick Robertson. So he's another guy the Leafs have to have a conversation about. I don't think there's too much conversation to be had there, but it'll be interesting. Let us know what your thoughts are. Before we wrap up here, just looking at a couple other things. One regarding Chris Tanev. He is leading and approaching the sole possession, obviously leading the Leafs this year in blocks, but approaching the sole possession of the Maple Leafs single season block record. And he comes out and says that he couldn't care less, basically, and that he wants to win. Obviously, Toronto native. It's great to see Chris Tanev, do that. And that goes to show like his value to this team. We saw it in the games that he missed. That pairing now with in what was Jake McCabe and now OEL, that's another thing. I think the game tonight is going to tell us a lot about the blue line pairings because, again, we hope McCabe doesn't miss time, but to see him come out and say that is very interesting. And he said on what he's expecting from Columbus, who are 4 points out of a wildcard spot, they're no pushover, hungry, desperate. They've kicked our butt twice, very offensive, very good off the rush. They're in a very good rush team with a lot of skill. So we got to try and neutralize that. They absolutely have to, and hopefully they can go ahead and do that as they are, again, looking at the standings here, 3 points ahead of Lightning, 4 points ahead of the Florida Panthers. Ladies and gentlemen, Berube's planning ahead with the goaltending situation. Hopefully, the Leafs can go ahead and take care of business tonight. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on that, and we'll be live following tonight's game, so make sure to stay tuned for that.